Two guards walked straight toward him, eyes locked like they'd already decided he didn't belong. Victor Lane didn't flinch. He just sat there in full army dress, blues refusing to move as six silent veterans rose from the crowd around him. Hi, everyone. Today we're starting with a scene that doesn't begin with shouting sirens or conflict. It begins with silence. The kind of silence that wraps itself around a football field in Fresno, California, just before something happens that nobody expects. A man sits quietly in the back row. He's not trying to stand out, but somehow his presence speaks louder than the morning announcements. He wears no signs asking for attention, no flashy colors, no camera crew. Just one uniform, one face, one reason for being there: his daughter. And the moment that follows, it'll change everything for everyone sitting in those stands. This could happen to anyone, even you. So before we dive into the story, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is right now. Now let's begin. The folding chairs were already out by 6:30 a.m. White plastic ones lined up in tight rows across the grass of Jefferson High's football field. Parents milled around claiming their spots early with tote bags and umbrellas, staking territory like it was a family reunion barbecue. Fresno's sun wasn't messing around that morning, the kind of light that showed up aggressive and made you question every clothing choice by 9 a.m. Someone passed out tiny paper fans with the school's logo printed in blue ink. And in the middle of all this excitement, the chatter, the camera flashes, the kids in caps and gowns sat one man. Victor Lane, 56 years old, sat 6 rows from the back, his hands resting on his lap, his boots polished to a mirror shine. He wore his army dress blues, not to show off, not to take up space, but because he promised his daughter Jasmine that when she walked that stage, he'd be there in uniform to show her that pride runs deeper than applause. The jacket still fit, the medal still caught the sun just right. Bronze Star, Meritorious Service, Army Commendation, each one pinned not for ceremony, but for real moments in real places: Fallujah, Kandahar, Basra. Victor had lived a lifetime in those uniforms and then left them behind to become a hardware store manager, a homeowner, a quiet man in a quiet neighborhood. But today wasn't quiet. He'd laid the uniform out the night before on the edge of his bed, ironed the creases himself, double-checked the placement of every pin. Jasmine didn't know he'd be wearing it. She had begged him not to make a big deal of graduation, saying it was just high school. But he'd smiled and said some things are worth showing up for. So there he was. Not in the front row, not on the aisle, just another father in a sea of parents, hands folded, heart pounding. A woman 2 seats over gave him a polite smile. Her husband whispered something to her. Victor caught it, the subtle glance, the half-finished thought. He didn't mind. It wasn't the first time people didn't know what to make of the uniform. A group of seniors in purple gowns gathered near the stage, laughing nervously and adjusting their caps. Jasmine was among them, her curly hair pinned carefully, gold honor cords resting over her shoulders. Victor could barely see her from where he sat, but he spotted the shoes she insisted on buying herself, white with tiny sparkles. She'd worked 2 weekends at the diner to pay for those. Victor leaned back just a little. He exhaled slowly. This was it. No parades, no speeches. Just a daughter, a diploma, and a dad who hadn't missed a single band concert, robotics meet, or science fair since he got out of uniform for good. Until 2 men began walking down the bleachers toward him. At first, he barely noticed. They weren't in a rush. Polos tucked in, radios clipped to their belts. One had a clipboard. The other wore dark sunglasses, even though they were in the shade. Their badges read, Event Security. Victor straightened slightly. Not a shift in posture, not a challenge. Just something old in his muscles remembered what attention felt like. They stopped a few feet from him. Clipboard guy cleared his throat. Sir, he said, can we speak with you for just a moment? Victor blinked slowly. About what? The man glanced around, then leaned in slightly. We've had some concerns. Concerns, Victor repeated, calm. The second man, Mr. Reese Tall, leaned. The one with the glasses nodded. Some of the guests have mentioned that your attire might be a bit distracting. We're just trying to keep the focus on the students today. Victor looked down at himself. This is my formal attire. We understand the first man, Daniel said quickly, and we absolutely respect your service. But we were asked to make sure the ceremony remains neutral and low-key. Victor's voice didn't rise. So let me get this straight. Me sitting here not saying a word is too loud for you. Reese cleared his throat. We're just asking if you'd be willing to relocate, maybe to the edge of the field or outside the gate, just while the main portion of the ceremony is underway. Victor didn't move. My daughter's about to graduate. I'm going to be right here when she does. Daniel shifted his weight. He wasn't expecting resistance. Most people just nodded, stood up, walked off, even when they didn't want to. But Victor wasn't most people. I'm not here for attention, he said quietly. I came to sit down, watch my daughter walk across that stage, and then go home. That's all. The two security men hesitated. Daniels glanced back over his shoulder like he was expecting backup. Reese reached for his radio but stopped halfway. A few nearby guests had started to notice the exchange. Conversations were dipping in volume. Someone from the fifth row leaned forward slightly, eyes fixed on the trio. Victor didn't shift, didn't puff his chest. He just sat the way he used to on long recon flights, still watchful. Sure. You're welcome to stay, Daniel said again. We're just asking if you'd consider. Victor raised one eyebrow. I considered. My answer is no. The silence around him thickened. No shouting, no drama. Just a quiet refusal. And then just behind him, someone stood up. A man in jeans and a worn army t-shirt. He had a beard that had seen more barbershop arguments than trims, and a stance that said he wasn't in the mood for nonsense. Victor, he asked. Victor turned slightly, his jaw relaxed. Marcus Bell, he said. I'll be damned. Marcus looked at the two guards. Is there a problem? Daniels opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Then from 2 rows ahead, another man stood. Navy sweatshirt, salt and pepper hair, quiet eyes. Served with him, he said simply. Ramadi, then another, one by one like notes in a slow drum roll. 6 men across the stands rose to their feet. No fanfare, no shouting, just presence. The guards looked around. The moment was no longer theirs. Victor didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He simply turned back toward the stage, folded his hands again, and waited. Because he wasn't there to win a battle. He was there to watch his daughter take her first step into the world, and nothing was going to stop that. Daniels didn't move. Neither did Reese. The 2 security officers just stood there, caught somewhere, between protocol and realization. You could see it in their eyes, the slow sinking awareness that whatever script they were given didn't fit this scene anymore. Marcus Bell hadn't said another word. He didn't need to. The way he stood with his feet planted, arms relaxed and eyes level was enough. The others spread across the bleachers mirrored that exact calm. Not a protest, not a threat. Just the kind of quiet defiance that makes people question their assumptions. Victor remained seated, his boots flat against the metal bleacher beneath him. He didn't turn to look at any of the veterans. He didn't nod. He didn't need to. Because this wasn't about solidarity for show. It was about something far deeper. He kept his gaze fixed on the front of the field where Jasmine had now found her seat with the other graduates. She was sitting in the middle section, 3rd row from the front. She hadn't noticed anything yet, too focused on keeping her cap in place as the wind teased the edge of her tassel. Reese adjusted his glasses. His hand hovered near the radio again. Check with administration, he mumbled, before turning and walking stiffly up the steps. Daniels followed close behind, not saying a word. The moment passed like a cloud moving across the sun. People exhaled. Conversations resumed, a little softer, a little more cautious. But the memory of what just happened didn't vanish. It hung in the air, tangible. Victor leaned back slightly. His breathing had remained even the entire time. Not because he wasn't affected, but because that's how he was trained. You don't let the moment control you. You control your presence inside it. Marcus sat back down with a slow creak of the metal. The man in the navy sweatshirt gave him a subtle nod before returning to his seat. The others followed suit, but the crowd had changed. From the corner of his eye, Victor saw a woman in a wide-brimmed straw hat lean toward her husband and whisper, "He's just watching his daughter." Why would anyone have a problem with that? The husband shrugged. People get funny when they don't understand something. That was the heart of it, Victor thought. It wasn't about rules or uniforms or medals. It was about comfort. And the minute someone felt uncomfortable, the system got itchy. Victor had seen it before in stores, in airports, even in churches. People couldn't name the discomfort, so they redirected it, sometimes subtly, sometimes with a clipboard. He kept watching Jasmine. She had just turned around to speak to the girl behind her and smiled. That smile that was the reason he woke up at 4:45 that morning. That was the reason he'd spent an hour making sure every inch of his uniform looked like it had on the best and worst days of his career. She was the reason he was sitting in the sun now, metal-covered chest quiet, while the heat built under the California sky. Then came the voice over the speaker system. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 2025 Jefferson High School graduation ceremony. Applause. Light and polite at first. The band started up a little offbeat, a little flat, but earnest. The kind of music only teenagers in matching vests can produce with full sincerity. Principal Karen Doyle approached the mic smiling wide. We're here today to celebrate our seniors, their hard work, their determination, and their bright futures. Victor didn't hear much of the next few sentences. Not because he wasn't listening, but because part of his brain was still replaying that earlier moment. The request to move, the reasoning behind it. He glanced back. Daniels and Reese were now near the field entrance talking to someone in a dark blazer, probably a supervisor. Victor kept his face neutral, but his body had tightened just a bit. Old instincts. You didn't assume things were over just because they went quiet. Principal Doyle was still speaking. Behind her, a line of students shuffled nervously. The roll call was coming soon. Then halfway through her opening remarks, Victor noticed a shift in her expression. She had just spotted him. Her eyes landed on his uniform, then flicked to the cluster of seated veterans. You could see the brief internal calculation, a pause, a moment of thought. Then she cleared her throat and continued. He respected that. She didn't look away, didn't frown. She acknowledged it, then kept moving. But 10 minutes later, she returned. Not to the mic, to the bleachers. Victor saw her walking down the aisle, her heels clicking gently against the steps. Her blazer was navy, her blouse white, her expression neutral but cautious. She wasn't coming with confrontation. She was coming with curiosity and maybe a clipboard full of concerns. She stopped at his row and spoke softly. Mr. Lane. Victor stood slowly. Ma'am, could we have a quick word? He nodded and stepped just to the side, still within view of the crowd. Still within reach of the chair, he wasn't about to give up. I understand there was a misunderstanding earlier, she began. Victor raised an eyebrow. Misunderstanding? Well, perhaps not misunderstanding. Some concerns were raised about your attire and whether it might distract from the ceremony. Victor looked her straight in the eye. I've worn this uniform to funerals, to re-enlistment ceremonies, to the side of a hospital bed while friends bled through tubes. And today I wear it to watch my daughter receive her diploma. Principal Doyle blinked. She opened her mouth and closed it again. Victor continued. I sat quietly. I didn't draw attention, but the moment people saw the medals, saw the fabric, they made a decision about who I was. That's not on me, she swallowed. I see that now. And I want to personally apologize. No one should have asked you to move. Victor nodded. Thank you. A pause. I'd like to invite you to stay exactly where you are, she said, and enjoy the ceremony as any parent would. He returned to his seat without another word. But the story wasn't finished yet, because not everyone agreed with her decision. It started small, a flicker of discomfort, a shift in posture 2 rows ahead, a whisper behind a folded program. Victor felt it before he heard it, that strange kind of tension that doesn't raise its voice but settles into the shoulders of a space like humidity before a storm. From the center section near the front of the field, a woman stood up, late 50s, sharp features, pearl clasp at her collar, the kind of posture that came with authority and the habit of being listened to. Her name was Patricia Lormer, longtime school board member, local philanthropist, and someone known in town for having standards. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. It carried anyway. Excuse me, Patricia called out, raising her program in one hand like a hall pass. Before we proceed with the rest of the ceremony, I think there's something we need to acknowledge. The MC at the podium froze mics still live. A few people turned, most didn't. But the mood changed instantly. Victor didn't move. He didn't even blink. Patricia continued. This is a school event. It's about our students, not about military service, not about personal statements. And frankly, this display, while perhaps well-intentioned, is inappropriate for a neutral school function. The word display cut through the air like glass dropped on tile. Several heads turned toward Victor, some with confusion, some with unease, a few with outright annoyance. Marcus Bell stood up slowly, didn't say a word. He just stood. Then the Navy vet, then the man with the Army patch on his sleeve. One by one, the same 6 veterans who had stood before now rose again, silently, not in defiance, not in aggression, in support, a presence that required no permission. Principal Karen Doyle, still seated behind the podium, stood and quickly made her way forward, intercepting Patricia before she could say more. Mrs. Lormer, she said gently but firmly, we're just about to conclude the roll call. I'd prefer to let the students have their moment without further delay. But Patricia wouldn't be deterred. I'm not trying to ruin anything. I'm speaking for several parents who feel the event has been hijacked by something it was never meant to be. Karen glanced toward Victor. He hadn't moved an inch. Still seated, still dignified. Then she looked back at Patricia and said evenly, the only person drawing attention right now is you. A hush fell across the field. No applause, no gasps, just a stillness. Karen stepped up to the microphone. I'd like to say something, she said, her voice clear and calm. What we witnessed earlier was not a disruption. It was a father showing up for his daughter. She turned slightly to face the audience. And if someone's pride in their child makes others uncomfortable, then I'd ask them to consider why that is. A murmur of quiet agreement spread through the stands. Patricia didn't sit yet. She was visibly rattled now, searching for a thread of control that had clearly slipped from her grasp. Karen stepped back. Let's continue. The MC cleared his throat and resumed reading names. Victor exhaled. Just once. Slowly. In front of him, Marcus remained standing for a moment longer, then gradually sat down again, hands on his knees like a sentry stepping off duty. From where she sat on the field, Jasmine finally looked up. Something had shifted. She didn't know what had happened, couldn't have heard the exchange, but she spotted the row of men now seated, the quiet attention fixed on the stage. And then she found him, her father. Their eyes met. She tilted her head just slightly with a small, puzzled smile. He didn't smile back, not fully, but his eyes softened just enough to let her know everything's fine. She turned back to the stage as the names ticked by closer now. Victor's hands rested on his knees. He'd been through enough operations to know when a mission was in its final stretch. From the far right bleachers, someone shifted noisily. Another complaint, another voice. But no, just a dad getting up to take a picture. Victor's eyes never left the student rows. Across the way, a woman with a baby in a sling leaned toward her partner and whispered, "Did he really cause all that?" Her partner shook his head. He just sat there. The rest, that was on them. And still the uniform didn't move. Not a thread out of place. Not a single metal clinked. Just quiet dignity centered on one thing. A name was approaching, a moment that mattered. For everyone else, it would just be another part of the ceremony. But for Victor Lane, it was everything. Jasmine Lane. The announcer said it clearly, cleanly, and with a tone that didn't try to dress it up or dramatize it. But for Victor, the moment landed like a lightning strike to the chest. All the side conversations, the camera clicks, the tension in the air, even the echo of Patricia Lormer's interruption disappeared in that instant. He stood, not fast, not with bravado, just deliberate, respectful. The same way he used to stand when a superior officer entered the room, the same way he'd once stood to salute folded flags. But this time he was standing for his daughter. From the middle of the field, Jasmine stepped forward. Her gown fluttered in the warm Fresno breeze. Her white shoes caught a glint of sun with each step. The gold honor cords draped across her shoulders shifted slightly as she moved, and her tassel bobbed along beside her. Victor's eyes never left her, and for a single perfect second, hers found his. She didn't beam. She didn't wave. She just gave him a look, soft, sure, and quiet. The kind of look between two people who've been through things together. The kind that says, I see you, I know what you've carried, thank you for showing up. Victor placed his right hand gently over his heart just above the row of medals, and nodded. No applause yet, not until Jasmine reached the podium. But the people around Victor, they felt it. A man 3 rows ahead lowered his phone. A woman next to him wiped at her eyes without even knowing why. One of the veterans who'd stood earlier murmured something under his breath, maybe a prayer, maybe a name, and bowed his head. Jasmine shook hands with the principal. Karen Doyle, composed but now visibly emotional, offered her a firm grip and a whispered congratulations. Then Jasmine accepted her diploma. The audience clapped. It started as polite applause, then grew, but not loud like a sporting event, not rowdy like a pep rally. It was something else. It was earned. Victor stayed standing for just a second longer, then sat again slowly, with purpose. Jasmine returned to her seat on the field, but not before glancing back at the bleachers. Victor caught that glance, held it, and something deep in his chest, something he hadn't allowed himself to feel since the day he retired, let go. Not regret, not sadness, pride. The kind of pride that doesn't need a microphone or a medal. The kind of pride that lives in the way you show up. As the ceremony moved on, Victor barely heard the remaining names. He sat quietly, hands still resting over his chest. A few rows over, Marcus leaned slightly in his seat and muttered worth every second. Victor didn't reply, just nodded. Behind them, the 6 veterans who had stood in solidarity earlier hadn't said a word since, but they hadn't taken their eyes off him either. It wasn't about the uniform. It wasn't about ceremony. It was about a man who had spent decades serving his country and was told by a couple of security guards and a school board member that his presence was too much. And yet he didn't raise his voice. He didn't rally a crowd. He didn't demand special treatment. He just stayed, calm, present. A symbol not of conflict but of quiet strength. As the band played the final procession and the graduates began tossing their caps, Jasmine remained seated for a moment. She picked up her cap carefully, looked at the gold tassel between her fingers, and held it for just a second longer. Then she stood and joined the others. From the field, she scanned the bleachers until she found him again. Victor raised one hand, not in a wave, just a steady acknowledgement. She smiled. She didn't need to say anything, because they both understood what had just happened. This moment had been about far more than a piece of paper or a ceremony. It had been about showing what respect looks like when no one hands it to you. It had been about presence, and no one could deny that Victor Lane had shown up, not just for Jasmine, but for every single person who ever wondered if they belonged. The caps had barely touched the ground before the crowd began to move. Families rose from the bleachers, unfolding themselves from hours of sitting in the heat. Voices lifted laughter, echoed, shoes scraped against metal steps. But Victor didn't rush. He stayed seated for a moment longer, just letting the moment breathe. He knew the difference between celebration and noise. Beside him, Marcus stood and stretched. "You gonna go down there?" he asked quietly. Victor nodded, once his hands still resting on his knees. In a minute, one of the other veterans gave him a gentle pat on the shoulder as he passed. "You did good, brother," he said. Victor looked up and gave a small smile. She did better. Down on the field, Jasmine was surrounded by classmates, hugging, crying, and posing for photos. She kept looking toward the bleachers, though searching for her father. Principal Doyle was still on stage, shaking hands and posing with the last few students. She saw Victor standing now at the end of his row and gave him a nod of quiet respect. It wasn't just polite, it was a signal. One that said, "You're seen, and you're exactly where you belong." Victor made his way carefully down the steps, his boots heavy but steady. The crowd parted for him without being asked. Not because of fear, not because of authority, but because there are certain presences you don't interrupt. When he reached the field, Jasmine turned, and everything else disappeared. She moved toward him, fast gown fluttering behind her. She didn't run, she moved like someone walking into the center of something they'd waited for. Victor stopped and waited. When she reached him, she paused for a second, just one breath, and then threw her arms around his chest, pressing her cheek to the row of medals. He closed his eyes, didn't cry, didn't shake, just stood there holding her. "I saw everything," Jasmine whispered. even if I didn't hear it all. I saw it. Victor leaned back, looking her in the eyes. Then you saw what it means to show up, even when some people don't want you to. She nodded. I'll never forget it. People moved around them taking photos, calling names, blowing air horns. But in that small space between a father and daughter, time slowed. Let's take a picture, she said suddenly, stepping back and pulling out her phone. Right here. Just us. Victor adjusted his gloves, brushing the edges of his sleeves. Jasmine held the camera up. Click. It wasn't staged. It wasn't perfect. But it was right. Later, she'd post that photo online. And the caption would be simple: he showed up. He always does. Across the field, Patricia Lormer was walking briskly to her car, avoiding eye contact. She wasn't used to losing the room, but this time she had. Because respect doesn't bend to policy, and presence doesn't need permission. Victor and Jasmine walked toward the exit together. A few parents stopped him along the way. Thank you for your service, one said. I'm sorry for what happened earlier, another whispered. Victor nodded politely but didn't linger. This day wasn't about them. It was about Jasmine. They reached his truck, and he opened the door for her like he always did. As she climbed in, she looked at him and said, You really didn't have to wear the uniform, you know. Victor grinned slightly. I didn't wear it for them. I wore it for you. She looked out the window for a moment. I think you reminded a lot of people what real pride looks like. He didn't answer right away. He started the truck. As they pulled away from the field, he said softly, Sometimes the loudest thing you can do is sit still and not move. And with that, they drove home. Together. No lights, no ceremony. Just a quiet ride through Fresno. A father in uniform, a daughter with a diploma, and a story that would echo far beyond a football field. Because when dignity refuses to be moved, people remember. Some stories don't need a climax to be powerful. They need presence. They need moments where people choose to stay instead of leaving to speak without raising their voice to lead, simply by refusing to be erased. Victor Lane didn't make a speech. He didn't shout. He didn't threaten. He just stayed. And in doing so, he reminded an entire crowd, students, teachers, board members, and strangers, that respect isn't something you wear to impress. It's something you carry quietly and reveal only when it matters most. We live in a world that often measures strength by volume. But sometimes the greatest strength lies in restraint, in calm, in dignity, and in the way you honor someone not through protest or performance, but through unwavering love. To every parent listening right now, maybe you've been overlooked. Maybe someone tried to push you to the side, made you feel like you didn't belong. But the truth is your presence matters. Showing up matters. And it's in those moments when the world gets uncomfortable with who you are that you must decide whether to blend in or stand your ground. Victor stood his ground. And Jasmine. She walked a little taller because of it. So next time you're told to sit down, to leave quietly, to be less than what you are, remember this story. Because dignity isn't loud, but it changes everything.